thank you for coming on to my podcast. I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you
Um,
so much for having me.
yeah, I know life is busy and we're on opposite sides.
Yes, we
um,
made it work.
yes, we made it work. So I'm in California, and where were you located again?
I'm in New Jersey, about maybe 20 minutes from upstate New York and about 45 from New York City.
Okay, yeah. So it's like nighttime over there right now, right?
Yeah, it's like 8.
Okay.
It's before my bedtime.
Okay. All right. So I guess I'll just have you introduce yourself, just a little bit about where you're from and the type of work that you do.
Yeah, happy to. So I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. Um, my mother's Cuban and she immigrated to the island around when she was 12. So it was definitely a change for her and her parents and her sister. My father's Puerto Rican. They met when they were in college. It's kind of crazy because they're both twins. So they met in a twin club. I don't even know if that was a thing. And then they had me and my brother. So we were both born and raised in Puerto Rico. And when I was 25 at the time, I had just finished college and whatnot at the island and decided to just try something different and new. And I really needed a change in my life. Like things weren't going well for me in the island. I was really just drinking a lot and partying a lot. And it was really just hard to find like my authentic self and not have other people define who I was. And so I decided to just, after completing my bachelor's in like software engineering, go to San Francisco, which is like the tech mecca in like Silicon Valley. And so I decided to like sell everything. So it was kind of like a little bit of an awakening and pack 3 suitcases, go to California, stayed there for about a year and a few months. Um, Met and fell in love with my wife and moved to New Jersey, which everyone's still very surprised that I decided to leave California for New Jersey. And so after that, it got very involved just because I had a lot of like learning disabilities and just figuring out who I was. Like I mentioned, that having people define you, got really involved into like mindfulness work and coaching people. So I'm actually like a tech leader. I manage a team of going to be 8 now, from very junior folks to more seasoned um, people in tech. And so got really involved into the mindfulness, and I kind of bring that aspect of mindfulness not only into the tech world but in my day-to-day life. And anyone that's looking for just like an anchor in life, like I feel like that's really helpful. It really helped me kind of find kind of like who I am and define that for me, not having others define it for myself. And so I've been in New Jersey for about 10 years now. So, but that's where I am right now. And so pretty content and happy. If you were to ask 1 to 10 where I am in my life right now, I would say probably like a 9, which I don't know if a lot of people could actually say that. I don't know if that was long winded, but hopefully it did touch upon some things that we want to talk about today.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a really amazing story. I like, yeah, that sounds like a really amazing story. And that's really interesting about your parents meeting in a, a twins club. That's awesome.
It's kind of wild. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people have that sort of story, which is funny enough because then my uncle and my aunt dated, but it didn't work out. But it did
Oh,
work
wow.
out for my parents. So that's how I'm here. But it's pretty interesting to say that that's how they met.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because they were all in the same club, right?
Yeah, so it's like I guess if you're a twin, you will like join as part of like I don't know if it was an elective or kind of like different clubs that universities offer. And so they were all in Puerto Rico. And my dad, I think, was doing maybe like an internship or something in Spain. And so my uncle met my mom and my aunt. And then when my father came back, he was like, "Oh, you should be my twin brother." And so it seems like my uncle and my aunt had hit it off first, but they went out on like a date, weird enough, and it didn't work out. But it did work out with my mom and my dad, and so it's a pretty funny love story.
Yeah. Are your parents still in Puerto Rico?
They are,
Oh,
they are, yeah.
okay.
All my family is, except so after Hurricane Maria, my older brother left with his family to Florida. But other than that, everyone else is there.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. So you mentioned that you moved to San Francisco and then you decided to move to New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
And you did this all by yourself.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I think probably the most interesting part of this, I think, as a society, or at least the thing that probably calls out for myself and my own story, is that I think people imagine women as like, you need a man in your life to kind of like help you through different things. But I'm kind of an example as to how you can just take a dream and just, really hyper focus on something and be driven and accomplish it all on your own. Um, so I think my family was really worried because, like I mentioned, like I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and so I had only done a 2-month internship in San Francisco. I didn't know anyone. In 2 months, you can learn the about like kind of how to navigate the city, but you don't really have an idea of what to expect. And so I didn't really have a lot. I didn't really come from a family that had a lot of money. We lived comfortably, but it wasn't really like, I could just go to San Francisco and things didn't go well. They would just send me a bucket of money. It was not, that was never the idea.
Mhm.
So it was basically like whatever little items I have left in Puerto Rico, like my car, maybe a couple of pieces of furniture, some TVs and whatnot. Like I sold whatever I could make some money from. And between my savings and that, um, my grandfather at the time, he's like he passed away, but he's just like a big North Star in my life. He bought me like this set of 3 suitcases, usually like the big suitcase, like kind of the middle one and the carry-on. And so anything that I could fit in those 3 suitcases was what I knew I could take with me. And so the two items that were non-negotiable was my Xbox and my laptop.
Mhm.
And clothes obviously was the rest. And so I moved with just a job offer, not no apartment. I ended up staying in a pretty reasonably priced hotel in Mission Street, which is not really a safe street in the city, and started my job 2 weeks after I moved. And so I remember housekeeping would come, and they would come every day or so, and they would see bags of like Target or like Ross for Less or something like that, of me trying to buy items for the apartment that I was eventually going to have, but I did not have yet. And so I ended up keep looking and trying to find an apartment that was not only recently priced, but that would not ask for a security deposit because I did not really have a lot of cash at the time. And so I feel like I wanted this so much that somehow the universe kind of like aligned for things to work out. Cause I'm thinking, like, how did I find an apartment in San Francisco in like 2013 that did not require it to have a security deposit other than $200? Like, that never happens. And
Yeah.
so, in between trying to buy items to actually build a home and trying to figure out life in San Francisco, like, I managed to do it, but it was really uphill because probably 3 months after I moved, I had found a job as a tech recruiter, which actually isn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a software engineer. But because I couldn't find anything, I was like, this is the best thing that I can do. And it'll get my foot in the door for something else. Maybe I can find myself on the own company that I want to go and work for rather than having someone else do that for me. So it was a lot of up and downs, being unemployed, trying to just figure out how to eat in a very expensive city. So it was really hard, but it was probably the best time of my life because I feel like I learned so much when you're just like alone by yourself. You have to figure it out on your own because there's no other way. It really shows like your character and who you are. Because it could have been very easy for me to just be like, I give up. I'm not going to try to stay in San Francisco after 3 months and pack my stuff and just figure out how to buy the ticket and go back home. But I was like, I'm determined. I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. Even if I lose the apartment, I'm not going to leave.
Mhm.
Like, I needed to figure it out. And so it was around that time where I really started to figure out like mindfulness and trying to be very minimalistic with my lifestyle, but also find like peace within so that I could then keep working towards my aspirations. So it was a really significant like turning point in my life.
Yeah, it does sound like that was, I mean, yeah, like just hearing the story, I'm like, wow. Like not only is it an expensive city, but it's also a very big city. And to do it by yourself, like navigate through that, like, yeah, that's like, wow.
Not even like my first language. Like I speak English, I feel pretty decent now. But when I moved there, like I could barely draft an email. Um, I could speak English, but obviously you could tell that I had like a very thick accent. Like now you can probably tell, but it's really like light, as I call it.
Mhm.
Back then you can really tell. And so that's something else on top of that is like, dealing with discrimination and things like that and trying to get job offers from someone that came from Puerto Rico, that graduated from the Metropolitan University of Puerto Rico. Kudos to them. But competing with people that graduated from like Stanford, because that's the university that's the closest to like Silicon Valley, or people that came from the East Coast from like Cornell or Harvard or something like that. Like I was competing with all these people. So it was also this internal battle of like, how do I compete with this highly educated people from like Ivy League schools when I didn't come from that? How do I compete with software engineers that can offer that as an education where I didn't have that? So it was a big challenge. And, also as a woman, also as being gay, like it's a lot of things that I always say, like, if there's a poster child for minorities, I'm it. In between
Mhm.
being gay and then like Latina and all of these things, like it's just really, um, it's a lot of challenges, but I'm like, you always really rise to those. Like if you have none, then you really just don't grow. You kind of like stay very still.
Yeah. And during all this, when you were going through trying to settle in and to your job and everything, like what what did you do to keep yourself, I guess, like motivated to continue? Because a lot of people would have probably given up and, like you said, just gone back, right?
Yeah.
Like
So
what helped you stay motivated to push forward?
so yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it was extremely hard. But so
Mhm.
I think one of the something that I use as a North Star is like I remember being in like my JetBlue flight to San Francisco, moving there and having just like a pen, and I turned around a napkin that they give you with like your soda or whatever drink that they give you for free for that flight. And I turned it around and I wrote things that I wanted to do, and I committed to myself at that moment in time that I would not move from San Francisco until everything in that napkin was accomplished. And if it wasn't accomplished, that there needed to be some sort of action plan to do it. And I kept that napkin, I think, for the longest time. I think I might still have it. And it's been probably 10 years now. Um, so that was a big motivator because I always had it nearby. So instead of just having like a vision board, it was like whatever I could come up with at the time. And I usually try to, as much as I can, even if it's just a couple of sentences. If there's an issue that I'm going through, I'll put it in like I have this moleskin that's like falling apart. But at the time I had that one. I've been replacing them as the years go by. And I think just writing down thoughts and things that I was struggling with and trying to figure them out as the days go by and as the weeks go by was really helpful. Um, my family's great. Um, I love them to pieces, but in complete honesty, they're not the best support system that probably someone could have. So I knew that I needed to like just depend on myself and myself alone. So I needed to come up with like, I don't want to say necessarily like a system or maybe like a workflow, but I needed to figure out how do I do these things on my own. And so, for example, in San Francisco, with the first job that I had, I wasn't really making a ton of money. So I was like, how can I make additional income and try to put some away as much as I can? And so back then there was this thing called dog vacay. And so I was like dog sitting over the weekend, and there was a couple of dogs that were near my office, and I would go and like walk them during my lunch break. So I was always brainstorming and always, it was really just funny, like just documenting your life. Like it sounds silly, but I was documenting my life because the only way for me to figure out challenges and blockers in my own life was to write them down and figure out like how do I battle this tomorrow or the weeks to come or the months to come. And not so much, I think a lot of people try to do like bullet journaling and really like define things, but there was no system that existed for what I was doing. It was just a way for me to create my own support system because I felt like I didn't have it with my family. So I was like really just on my own at that point. Um, and so with the journaling and the mindfulness, because I also had like a lot of learning disabilities in between dyslexia and ADHD, I incorporated that with meditation every day. And I would have these moments of just like just clear, kind of having like a clear mind to figure out what I wanted to do, where even when I was unemployed, I was still bringing in money from little freelancing gigs that I could find so that I could keep eating and paying my rent as much as I could, or delaying it for another month so that I could then find a full-time job. So it was more like taking it day by day, but really just documenting your life. And especially if you don't have a support system, like I think that's a big thing for a lot of people, and a lot of people don't have it, and a lot of people question why we don't have it. And I think at that time in my life I was really questioning it, and it wasn't until very recent that I learned why I didn't have it, listening to like a wellness podcast around children that are really emotionally intelligent and parents that are not, and parents waiting for their children to solve their emotional issues instead of their parents providing that emotional support. And so just trying to figure out your life as you're living it. But just the best way of doing it is just like take a minute. Take a minute. Nothing's gonna happen. Life is gonna continue on, even if you take 5 minutes of just being present, so that instead of going out and partying in a bar and having a couple of drinks, giving your life the care that it really requires in order for you to keep achieving things that you want to do.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that because I feel like it's easy to, like you said, it's easy to go have a drink or whatever.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when you're sober up or whatever, like the issues are still gonna be there. Right.
Yeah.
And so I really like the techniques that you mentioned, but then also even with the napkin, because I feel like a lot of the times, like just writing down your goals helps so much. Like just having them visually, like in front of you to see. And then with the journaling as well, I feel like for me, I do a lot of journaling too. And it's kind of like the same because if you don't have like a big support system or like people that you could talk to about what's going on and in your life or whatever, and journaling kind of serves kind of like a little, it's like you're doing venting but you're doing it
Right.
to your journal. And so it does help instead of like just having everything like bottled up inside, and not talking about it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people too see journaling as like a lot of homework. And so one thing that I kind of implemented in my life, even after my time in San Francisco, is like if you don't feel like journaling every day because it seemed like a task, like do like a quarterly journaling, like every 3 months in your life. In 3 months, a significant amount of things happen in your life. And I tell people a lot of things. If you work for a corporate company or you have your own business or whatever it may be, quarterly things are triggered naturally by the way businesses are run. Either if you're a manager in a corporate company, you're going to do performance reviews, most likely every 3 months. Or if you're in finance, most likely things are looked at in 3 months. Or if you have your own business, you have to look at your business. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing for a living. Every 3 months, where whatever it is, it gets triggered. So you can review your life in this 3 month period and be like, what did I do in these 3 months? Did I achieve things that I had kind of like in the backlog of my head of things that I wanted to do? And if not, what are the things that are stopping me and what can I do in the upcoming 3 months? Because I think a lot of people shy away from journaling because they feel like it's a lot of work. I can't do this daily. I'm like, great, don't do it daily. Like a lot of people that I talk to in the mindfulness space, when they're like, can you just help me, can you just mentor me, just trying to get some things in order in my own life so I feel more fulfilled, that's the first thing that I tell them. I'm like, do you see yourself journaling every day? I don't know if I'm going to remember. Well, if you put a reminder, it's not going to happen, because
Yeah.
if it's not in you to wanting to do it, you at least get that triggered naturally from your environment around you to do it every 3 months. And you can follow a very easy template. Like you should just have that in like a simple notebook. And every 3 months, it'll be triggered to make you look at your own life, because people want to do it. That's the thing. A lot of people are like, I don't know if I want to journal. I'm like, you want to do it, because if you didn't want to do it at come December of every year, you wouldn't be putting pictures on your Instagram of
Mhm.
whatever it is that you wanted to do, unless you're only doing it to show other people what you did in the year. But most of the time, it's like you really want to take a deep look at your life for the last 12 months. So rather than doing every 12 months, why don't you do it every 3 months? And it'll really just at a micro level, rather than waiting the 12 months, just really look deep down, because we all have goals and ambitions, but we either listen to the inner critic or what other people are telling us, because people are constantly trying to define us. So if you let those voices take over, you're never going to do anything. Because if I would have listened to everyone that told me, because even my sister in law, I remember she was sitting at the barbecue that my dad had done for me to leave, like a go away barbecue sort of thing. This woman was with a notebook calculating how I was going to fail, because
Oh
she didn't
gosh.
think, yeah, because she did not think that the money that I was making with the job offer that I had was going to be enough. And so if I would have listened to her, if I would have listened, because she's an accountant, so she thought she was doing me a favor, but
Mhm.
it did not look like that at the time, which I still don't think that it was a favor, because I don't think you should do that to someone when they're about to get on a plane to try to achieve whatever they want to do. You should just encourage them and support them in any way that you can. But she was running the math and she was telling me, you're not going to make it. This is not enough. Like, this is how rent is and groceries. And I was like, I will figure it out. If my full-time job doesn't do it, I can freelance in different ways until I find a job that's going to be sufficient to sustain my lifestyle. But I tell people, if you're very frugal and minimalist, you don't really need much as a human being. We just let other people tell us what you need as a human being. And that's when things get expensive. When you think that you need the BMW, not because you're a car fan, but because someone else told you that you needed that, or someone told you that you needed the 3,000 square feet house, and but you don't know what to do with the space because you're content with a smaller apartment that gives you everything that you need. So every time you let someone else define you or define what success is when we get really just lost in that journey. But with going back to the journaling, that's why I think like you can always customize that to your own lifestyle, to your own routines, to use that just really as a tool, because there's no other way. Like, I look at journals when I was like a teenager in high school, because I was doing it without knowing at that time, because I used to write a lot of music. But in my music, there was a lot of truth that I couldn't even comprehend at that time, of how confused and hurt at life I was, because I didn't know who I was and no one was really helping me with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's true. Like we journal in different ways, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I used to do that too. I used to keep like scrapbooks, to put pictures in and even write things down. And so that was a form of journaling. And I agree, like journaling shouldn't be like a chore that you feel like you have to do.
Right.
There's different ways to do it. And like you said, it doesn't have to be a daily thing. It can also be like a tool to use as needed. I feel
Right.
at least
Yeah.
that's how I'm using it right now currently. And I also found it helpful that there's so many different journaling apps available now too. And so like
Yes.
if someone doesn't want to write things down on a notebook or something, whatever, just having your phone is just like a really big tool and it's super convenient. Like you could just open up the app and just write into your journal. um, and it's password protected. So that's also like a
Because I
really
think
good
that's
thing.
a lot of the things too that people are scared of. But, and I think journaling probably encompasses a much broader conversation that we let on to be. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even with my team, I have a lot of people that like start really new, and once they've been here for like a year and a half, they're trying to figure out what their next career move is, and they don't know what to do. And so they're looking to me as like their manager to tell them what to do. And I'm like, I can never tell you what to do, because I will probably point you into pretty good direction, but it will never really be what you probably want to do. And I make them do an exercise where they ask a family member, a friend, and like a colleague or a mentor, like, what do they think that they're really good at and what do they think they need to improve? And then they ask, and then after they, without looking at those answers, they answer themselves first, and then having their own answers and the answers from these three people, they compare them. And most of the time, they find what they're really good at to move through their career without really having to do much other than that. And that's a form of journaling, asking someone to journal for you and asking yourself to do this exercise. And so I try to encompass this like mindfulness journaling sort of tactics, not only in my daily life, but those who are around me that might report to me, or even a neighbor that I end up speaking about mindfulness and they're interested. Um, I end up including all of this, and a lot of people find a lot of use. And it seems like I said, like such a simple system that we tend to overlook. So there is an aspect of mindfulness work, because at the end of the day, everything in life is work, but there's an aspect of mindfulness work in everything that we do. And sometimes we don't even realize it, whether it is on a personal level, with a relationship, with a spouse, with a friend, with a parent, um, in your career, when you're branding yourself. There's a competitive market nowadays to find a job. You end up in a very mindful way doing all of these things, and you can kind of see the fruits of your labor. So it's like a really simple exercise that I think we tend to neglect a lot.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. Just moving forward to after San Francisco, you said that's when you moved to New Jersey.
I did. So it's kind of wild too, because so my idea was to always stay in San Francisco as long as I could to grow my tech career. And if things went south, then I would go back to Puerto Rico. But I have a couple of family members in Florida. So I was always like my plan B. So I always kind of had my North Star and what could happen if not. But so I remember moving there, and probably the first week I ended up going to Fisherman's Wharf. And as I'm walking, so random, this woman touches my shoulder and I turn around and she's like, "You came here to find happiness, but you will find love here too." And I swear, I'm not making this up. I say this
What?
story and no one believes me. But this was an older woman. She must have had like a shawl or something. And she knocked it, like touched my shoulder, and she was like, "You came to find happiness and you will find love here." I was like, "This woman's crazy. What is she talking about? This is what happens in San Francisco." That was the first thing that happened to me. Like the first thing that I thought about was that this is what happens in San Francisco. And so I kind of let it go. To the day, a month later, I met my now wife, and so we dated for a very long time, long distance for a year, and I ended up moving to New Jersey to see if this was going to work out. But even then, the move to New Jersey wasn't really like, I don't want to say that I planned everything, but I did do some research as to would this be successful for me. And I was talking to one of my mentors in San Francisco, and at the time he's like, "We're in 2014. The tech industry in New York is growing. So if you really just want to make a splash into the tech industry and continue growing your career, if you're going to do it now." And that's all I needed. And I was like, I trusted this person at the time, which is, she's great. She was right. And I moved to New Jersey and was commuting to New York City to work there. And so ended up growing my career significantly in New York City, especially because I think living in San Francisco, being in Silicon Valley, and contributing so much in what I did for a year really opened a lot of doors. So it was really a smart move, because they wanted talent from San Francisco in New York, and they didn't have that much. So it was really a great stepping stone to be in San Francisco. There's a lot of talent there, so it's really hard to hire. But being in New York, it was like there's not a ton of people. So at the time, now it's oversaturated. But at the time in 2013, it was still pretty early for tech startups. So I moved here and grew my career. And always having mindfulness kind of like in the background, and knowing that that would always be my, like I mentioned all the time, my anchor. Um, and keep growing my career, and eventually went into leadership and really embraced mindfulness for myself and my team. Did many talks in pretty big conferences where I'm just trying to also teach a lot of leaders about mindfulness and leading teams with a mindfulness aspect, so that we can prevent burnout, and we can just really just highlight people's talents. And that's has just been my North Star, and kind of like the path in life is just combining this mindfulness aspect that brought me not only so much joy, but so much value in my life, into leadership and coaching, which is something that brings me a lot of value and fulfillment and passion in life.
Yeah, I'm really glad everything worked out and you were able to pursue your passion. I mean, pretty much like, so you're doing leadership right now and coaching.
Mhm.
So, okay.
Yeah. So that's so I do a lot of leadership in the tech industry, but then I do a lot of coaching a little bit outside the tech industry. So I'm kind of having build I'm writing a book called The Renegade's Journey to Stillness, which embraces that story from the beginning that I was sharing, and also this personal growth and mindfulness aspect of it. So when I'm not being kind of like tech leader and involving all of these mindfulness aspects, I'm also doing it on a personal level with just a lot of people that they're not really happy with their status in life. And I just think it's mostly because I do, if you don't know your values and your core values and things that you stand for and things that feel right for you and feels that and things that might not feel as right for you, is really just hard to find that fulfillment and passion in life. And so I really start coaching with that, kind of had like a values worksheet and helping people define that, because that was things that I was doing in San Francisco, coming again to those journaling exercises. It's just really like what really defines me, what really is authentic for me, what really brings value to my life, to then start working on everything else. Because you can't, a lot of us start trying to find, we find fulfillment and passions looking at like the exterior first rather than the interior. Like, okay, if I have the big house, if I have the really nice paying job, if I have the most expensive car, oh, I'm going to be so happy. So it's always like filling this hole with more things rather than what really brings me like fulfillment and like I feel passionate about and that could bring me to a certain level of happiness first. And even if it is buying that car and buying that house, but maybe it isn't for you and you're following someone else's dream. So that's what the whole personal coaching is about and what the book is about. And then in the tech leader world, I incorporate that, but more for career growth and making sure that people are taking the right roles for the right reasons rather than working in my team and maybe they don't feel like that's the right role for them. And I've helped people just grow out of my team to do something else within the same company. But I help them as well because I'm like, I don't want you in my team if this is not what you really feel fulfilled doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds really amazing. And it's true. I feel like you said, just trying to fill that hole up with like all of these material things or things that you think that you want, right? Like it's just like a never ending hole. Because I feel like there's always going to be something better or something else like you feel is better. Um,
Right.
and it's just like a never ending thing. And yeah, like just finding happiness within, I feel, at least for me, that's still a journey that I'm working on. And so I have noticed like a big difference from just changing my attention from like outer things to just within myself. um there's just so much less pressure, and I feel like just more happy. I don't know.
Yeah. And it takes, it's also like stages in life. Like when I was in San Francisco, I knew in my core that I wanted to be in a busy city with all the noise and everything that was happening because I knew that that was the only way to network and grow that network to then do what I wanted to do next. But now, me and my wife bought a house like near the woods and like our neighbors are like bears basically. And so, but that's what I want now is I want to make myself a nice drink and sit by my fire pit, enjoy really nice company, or read a book, or come and watch a movie in like the projector that I put outside. Like that's what it brings me fulfillment. Like the city didn't serve me any longer, and I needed to be very clear and understanding when the city stopped serving me to then find what's serving me later because your life is going to be seasons, and what served you in one season is not going to serve you in the next one. And so I don't know if we all achieve that kind of level of understanding. Not saying I don't want to sound like I feel like I'm superior to anyone, but I think it takes a lot of work to be human. It's work to be human. We think of full-time jobs of 9 to 5 and then being a parent and being a spouse and being a sister, but you existing alone is work. So we need to make time for ourselves because when we don't, we get into this really gray area where we just don't understand what we want. And it's a really dangerous area to be at because you don't want, like I mentioned, other exterior noises or people or environments where you might be hanging out to define who you are rather than doing that for yourself.
Yes. I just love the way that you um explain things. Like it's just explained so like beautifully.
Thank you.
And I love that. Um yeah, thank you. Can you just I was also reading like your bio. Can you talk a little bit more about the course that you are working on, or is it available already, the Mind Shift course?
Oh, yes. So it's available in the sense that it's going to be live very soon. So, but the idea is it's going to be an audio course. So I'm in between it being available and listenable or inside timer, where I have my own meditation teacher profile where I share free meditations for people that are willing to start kind of one-on-one meditations. But so the course really walks you through, if you're interested in meditation, how to start, because I think a lot of us get very intimidated as to what meditation could be. And so one of my favorite meditation teachers and mentor, if you will, is Jeff Warren. He has a couple of things in common. So he has the do nothing project, where you just sit literally and meditate and do nothing, and it's a very simple technique. And so I feel like I've taken a lot of his lessons and embraced it in my own meditation style. And in this course, where I not only teach the one-on-ones of meditation, but I go through different exercises. And so, for example, when a simple exercise that kind of added in that course that comes from a pretty popular psychologist is, when you're feeling overwhelmed, whether it is at work, whether it is being a parent of a toddler and a teenager, whether it is being a spouse, whatever situation you might be living through, is taking a breath and calling out a physical object in your home. So let's just say you're in the kitchen and you take a deep breath and you close your eyes and you say microwave, and you take another deep breath and you say stool, and you take another deep breath and say table, and something like that. And literally takes seconds, but it breaks the narrative and it breaks that pattern of feeling overwhelmed to the point that it kind of brings you back to the present moment, so that you can deal with the challenge that you could be dealing with at that time, which is the toddler and the teenager, or being a spouse, or your 9 to 5 job has given you this crazy project that you know you're not going to meet the deadline. But it really breaks the narrative, because sometimes it takes a second to step away from something, come back, fresh eyes, fresh mind, to tackle the problem. So the course embodies a lot of that, a lot of those exercises, a lot of tips and tricks, a lot of things that you can incorporate in your daily life, and sometimes even tie into current routines and habits that you have. Because we don't want to take in mindfulness into your day-to-day life and break the routines that you already built. We can incorporate them to the things that you do every day, whether it is you make your morning coffee, maybe while you're drinking your morning coffee, instead of putting, news on the TV, or maybe sit and meditate while you're drinking your coffee for a couple of minutes, or if you're taking your afternoon walk, or whatever it is, incorporate these things in your day to day. So in a nutshell, that's what the course is going to be. So I'm figuring out which platform I want it to be available in, but it will be available very soon in either Insight Timer or Listenable.
Awesome. I love that. I love that so much. And I feel like I'm going to check it out whenever it's available,
Yes, please
because,
do.
yeah, it's so hard to just sit still and just
Yeah.
do nothing, especially for me. Like I'm constantly like doing something or working on a project, whatever, but just taking the time to just sit and like just do nothing and just be present, like that sounds amazing. And I that takes work too. And so what I tell people also when I'm talking about these mindfulness techniques is to really try to practice them. I don't want to say daily, but not waiting until like last minute when you're having an anxiety attack or you're like extremely overwhelmed. Like a lot of these techniques take a lot of practice, and you want
Me
to
too.
make sure to practice them like even when you aren't feeling overwhelmed, like you said, just maybe taking a few minutes just to sit down and meditate, and so that when that situation does come up where you're feeling like super overwhelmed, like it's something that comes more naturally to you, to be like, okay, like I'm going to sit here, I'm going to, take the deep breath and point out something that I see, right? And so, yeah, a lot of practice, but it's very helpful and it does help.
And it doesn't take that long. I have one meditation on Insight Timer that's about 3 minutes. And people ask me all the time, you meditate every day? I'm like, and they think I just meditate for hours. I'm like, I do 10 minutes in the morning, 10
Oh,
minutes
yeah.
right before the day starts. And my wife and I decided when we bought the house to make one of the rooms that faces the front of the house a wellness room. And so that room, the only thing that it has is my meditation corner and like her Peloton and a couch for a dog to hang out and look outside when we're not home. And that's all it's in that room. And I meditate every day there. And if there's a day that I woke up late because whatever reason I stayed up late or whatnot, and I don't go into that room, I might do it on my desk in between meetings. So it's just I try to be very mindful and include it, even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's 2 minutes. I try to do 10 because I feel like my day is off to a better start if I do 10. But if there's days that I can't, then I either do like three simple breaths. It's literally what the exercise that I had mentioned, or 5 minutes before between meetings, between Zoom meetings, literally sitting in my desk. And so it's just the nature of including that into your day. It's just like we brush our teeth. So
Yeah, just
even when
making
you're
it
brushing your
part.
teeth,
Mhm.
you can do it. Just being very mindful of how it feels to brush your teeth and just not thinking about the next thing that you have to do. Because a lot of parents ask me too, how do I do this when I have children? I'm like, do it during the things that you know that you need to do, maybe when they're not around, picking them up from school, or when you're making their lunch and they're playing video games or watching TV or they already went to bed. Like you can do it in those moments in your life. Is figuring out how to do it in those moments in life, because we all imagine the meditation needs to happen with our eyes closed. But when we meditate with our eyes open, it really teaches you how to navigate life because you're moving and your body's moving. And that's how we live. You're not sitting in the cushion all day. So those are the moments that really count.
Yes. Um, yeah, it doesn't have to be, like you said, a very long process. And just that kind of reminded me like when I first started learning about meditation, or when I even heard the word meditation, like all I could think about was like cartoons and movies, like where they're just
Right.
sitting and meditating for hours. And yeah, like it doesn't have to be that way. Um, and yeah, I mean, I agree with everything. And even with, if you have children, depending on like obviously the child, every child's different,
And the
like
age.
age wise, yes. You could try to incorporate your kids into it.
Yeah.
I know that for me, I have a 5-year old. And so I really wanted to start teaching her to meditate herself, like just develop all of these really good habits and stuff with mindfulness. And nowadays, like there's a lot of books for kids in
There is.
mindfulness and all of these different things. And so I actually bought her a book, and it's like mindfulness stretching or something like that. And it's like really cute stretching activities to help, children calm down pretty much. And there could be a lot of different fun ways to do it if it's just completely like impossible for you to not have any alone time.
You can do it with
Yeah,
them. There's
yeah,
so
there's a
many.
lot of
Like I
ways.
agree with you. Like I have one again in my Inside Timer profile, which is the favorite dessert. Because the only way sometimes that you get children to do it is incorporating something that they really like. And a lot of kids like sweets. So this meditation is about 5 minutes because they do have short attention spans. 5 minutes, and it's incorporating like imagining their favorite desserts, and I kind of guide them through the whole thing for 5 minutes. But I'm making another one about superheroes for those kids that like superheroes, and I'm trying to find out other things because I feel like the meditation space for children can be a little bit more broader than what it actually is. And it's just finding things that they like, incorporating it for at least 5 minutes. And what we're doing is just setting them up for success in the future because then they try to incorporate that in their lives as a teenager and whatnot. And they can come back to it when they need it. But we're also sending children out to society. They're going to be a little bit more calmer and collected, and to just have a better world. Like if every parent did what you're doing, I think we would be in such a much better space overall.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on my podcast and just chatting with me. Like, it's been great, and I've learned so much. And I'm really looking forward to your course and your book. And so I'll be on the lookout for that. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Where can listeners like find you if they wanted to? learn more or just even be on the lookout for your book and stuff, like where can they find you?
Oh yeah, no, that's great. So I have a website called Marita Espada, Espada, and there you can sign up as well for like the mindfulness newsletter. It's not really like spam. It's like once a month to get some food for thought, and ideas and things like that, and updates for the book. And as well, there you can find the course and my Instagram if you're interested in following me on social media. It's Marita underscore ESP, and that's probably the two areas where I frequent the most, and people can find updates on the course like I mentioned in the book, and the meditations on Insight Timer. And they can also follow my podcast, The Turning Point Podcast, where I talk with many guests, entrepreneurs, creatives, and people in the meditation space that share what they do in their lives and what have been the most significant turning points.
Thank you. And I will definitely send people on over with any questions and stuff. So, but yeah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for
Appreciate
having
it.
me. It's been a great time.
Thank you.